evening. Welcome to the November 7th Advisory Council meeting for the Bureau of Household Goods and Services. First off, I'd like to, welcome everyone that's here. Thank you for all coming. Advisory Council members, for those that are on the phone as well, thank you for joining us. And all the staff from the Bureau and DCA that have helped prepare to get this meeting to make it successful. So first off, we'll start with the facility safety and courtesy items. Item 1A, which for those that are here, the two exits, one over here to your left, double doors that would go out to the lobby. The restrooms are also that way. You take a right at the lobby entrance, and it's around the corner. This is the other exit here behind the council, and you would take a right and go all the way down the hall to exit in case that there was emergency. Anything else on that? No? Okay. So we'll go right into our roll call, item 1B of the council and folks on the teleconference. We'll start with the council members that are here, and then we'll go to those that are on the phone.
Donald Lucas, public member.
Rita Wong, Deputy Bureau Chief.
Nicholas Oliver, Bureau Chief.
Sharon Bradley, Home Furnishings Association.
Bert Grimes, Pacific West Furniture.
Pascal Beniamini, Drinker, Brittle and Wreath.
Steve Weidekamp, California Moving and Storage Association.
Chris Higdon, California Moving Systems.
And any advisory council members on the phone.
McDaniel, Service Contract Industry Council.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, any audience members or folks on the phone that would like to introduce themselves?
Chris Carlson with Republic Moving and Storage.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
This is Brad Miller with Bethma.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for joining. Could you repeat that, sir?
Yes, Pratik Sitapuria, Pratik with Intertech.
Intertech? Okay. Thank you.
Services.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we couldn't quite hear you. Could you repeat?
With Hooker Furniture.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Okay, thank you. Anyone here visiting that would like to introduce themselves? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Item C, review and discuss future meeting dates. So March 12th or 19th would be the proposed dates. I'm open to either one. Do you have a preference? 12th.
Either one is fine. Yeah, 12 fine.
Okay. All right, March 12th it is. An item that is not on the agenda, but that I'd like to discuss is the advisory council's term. So this is the end of the 2-year term for the advisory council. I'd like to thank you all for your input and your service. Some of you have submitted applications to remain on or be reappointed to the advisory council. Some have not, and we also have several new applicants. Those are being reviewed now. As some of you know, we have a new director at DCA, and so I'll be working with her to appoint a new advisory council within the month. So we'll send that out. We'll announce it on our website, social media, on our listserv. So once we know, you'll all know. So, anything to add to that? No? Okay. As far as the July council meeting recap, a lot of the items that we discussed there will be follow-up today on. So unless there's something that sticks out to the council members here on the phone or anyone, we'll move forward. Is that okay? Okay. All right, so let's get into the operations update, item number 2A, starting with the budget. Go ahead and introduce yourself too, please.
All right. Good morning. My name is Carl Bierman with the Department of Consumer Affairs Budget Office. I'm here this morning to provide you a budget update as well as cover some of the Bureau's financial documents. And accounting is currently working on closing 2018-19. So we have prelim 12 data available for 2018-19. Which is good news. I know there's been some concerns regarding reporting and timely financial reporting. You are not alone in that arena. Everyone in the state is sharing that concern with you, but I do have some good news in that arena as well. Department of Consumer Affairs Fiscal Office is working with the DCA OIS, so Information Technology Services, to develop our own reporting system that will use a large data dump from Fiscal to put the data in a format that is more easily readable that we can produce on a monthly basis. That'll be done through the Qbert system, which the Bureau may be familiar with. The idea is that we'll get a report essentially from Fiscal every month, and the Bureau should be able to run its own fiscal reports every single month via the Qbert software. So those are all good things, and we're making progress. So I know there's been some delays in the past in reporting, largely due to the State Controller's Office is not currently on the Fiscal system, and it's taking our accounting department an extended period of time to reconcile with a different system other than Fiscal. So there's additional milestones that have been introduced, and that's why there's been such a backlog. So moving on, I'd like to cover the Bureau's 3 fund conditions. They should be included in your meeting packet. Just a brief overview of how to read this document. It comes in 4 sections. The top section is the beginning balance, which is essentially just a rollover from what the ending balance was from the prior year. The second section is your revenues. That includes all of your renewal and application fees, et cetera, as well as any interest that may be earned on revenue that's in your fund. The third section is expenditures. That first line item under number 1111, that is the Bureau's appropriation for current year and on. The 2 prior years show your actual expenditures. So those have been updated. The other items are direct assessments to your funds, such as the pension payments, Fiscal charges, et cetera. And then the bottom line is your fund balance and your months in reserve. That's really what we use as a barometer in the budget office to see how healthy a fund is doing. And if you look at all three of these documents, all three of your funds have an incredibly healthy reserve. So there are no concerns there.
Ask you a question.
Sure.
If you look at the appliance repair, you know, they have 16 months reserve.
Mhm.
Home Furnishings got 4, and the Movers has 9.
Yeah, and
How
budget year
healthy
plus one.
how healthy can the Home Furnishings be if it's
So
Wait, no.
one thing to note is because we don't know what is actually going to be spent in current year and the budget years, that's your full, it shows your full appropriation being spent. If you look at the prior years, you probably spend about 900,000 less a year than what your appropriation is. And so that poses no concerns to us that in the out years, your reserves are going down a little bit. Because we know it'll actually be healthier than what the document is showing. Did I answer your question? Okay. Any other questions?
I have no questions, but I have a comment.
Mhm.
I am very pleased to hear the news that you guys are closing out fiscal year 2017-18. We have been awaiting that, and I'm also very excited to hear that we're going to be able to run our own budget reports soon. That's
Yeah,
wonderful
our
news.
goal is but we've been working with OIS for the past couple of months. Our goal is to have a report live by January 1st. The date on which we'll be able to get the data dumps from Fiscal on a regular basis every month, those dates will be forthcoming, but I imagine it'll be the middle of the month, similar to when the Bureau received CalSTARS reports in the past. So, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. We're happy about that too, so.
Are there any questions from folks on the phone?
No question. I just want to let you know Judy Levin's on. Thank you.
Hi, Judy.
Hello.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Mhm. Anytime.
Okay, we'll move to item B under operations. That is our personnel update. And I believe Deputy Chief Rita Wong will do that.
Yes, hello. I have an update. We have actually quite a bit to report in the personnel updates since the last time the Advisory Council has met. First off, we wanted to inform you guys that we have 3 long-term Bureau employees who are going to be retiring in the next few months. Carrie Cathalafad from our lab, the supervising chemist, her retirement is coming up in the next couple of months. We have an inspector who is responsible for one of the inspectors responsible for regulating home furnishings and thermal insulation, Zinni Mercado. She's also retiring at the end of this year. And then recently announced, upcoming a little bit farther out, probably I'm thinking the end of March, end of March.
End of March is the date, but I will be probably out of the office by the end of January.
So that was Karen Skelton. She is our Bureau licensing manager. She's going to be leaving, middle of February, middle of March somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I'd just like to add, of course, that all of the staff that are retiring, have been with the Bureau for a very long time. And I, as well as I'm sure folks in the Advisory Council that have worked with, definitely worked with Carrie for a long time, right? She's has done a wonderful job, and we'll miss her at the Bureau. And Zinni as well. She's been an inspector for the Bureau. I don't know how long, but it's been a while, more than 15 years probably, right? So, and then of course Karen, our licensing manager, who's been one of the biggest helps to me at the Bureau since I've been there. And we've done a lot of trips together, a lot of hiring, a lot of interviews together of staff, and I appreciate everything that you've done for not just for me, but also for the Bureau, and we'll miss you a lot. Anyone else have?
I just hope you can convey our thanks to Carrie. I know I've worked with her before, and she's done a great job, and I know the rest of the lab is also good, so.
Yeah.
And I would ditto that. I really want to say thank you to Carrie and to everybody else who's done a great job for the Bureau.
Thank you. We will be sure to relay that message to her. Okay.
Okay, continuing on with the personnel update. We've filled, since the last council meeting, we've filled a number of vacancies. In our policy unit, we have filled our research data specialist position with Kara Williams. This is a position that will be focusing on household mover fee schedule and max 4 tariff rate studies. In the field investigations unit, we've recently promoted, actually, within Alda Aguirre, who was one of our special investigators. We've promoted her to supervising special investigator of Southern California, which is a first for us. We haven't had a supervisor down in Southern California over our field investigators before, so it's very exciting for us and for Alda. We also, in the field unit, the field support unit, we recently promoted another candidate from within the Bureau, Nick Parra, to an associate governmental program analyst, AGPA, who's going to be responsible for field support from here within the Bureau headquarters. In our compliance unit, we've hired 2 new staff services analysts for processing and investigating complaints. We've got Stephanie Caruth and RJ Alarcon, both who I believe are here today. If you guys want to give a little wave. Oh, and then in addition to that, we've hired 2 new front office support services office technicians. And that one is going to be supporting the complaint intake, Christina Bustamante. Is Christina here? Yes, there she is. And then for Bureau-wide support, and especially our front face for the Bureau's front counter, we have new office technician Ashley Ryder. Thank you for humoring me and giving me the waves. As far as future recruitments go, we are currently in the middle of recruiting for a Northern California supervising special investigator. We had one previously who moved on to another agency, and we've been trying to fill the position. And we are currently, we have recently reposted that position. So we're trying to find the perfect candidate for supervising our Northern California field. Relating to our field, we're also going to be hiring very soon another 4 special investigators to add to the team, and those will be hired throughout the state of California. And more good news, the Bureau just recently received approval to reclass our chemist series with the laboratory into the environmental scientist classifications. So we're looking at having 3 environmental scientists, and soon we should also, do we have the official approval for this? Okay, so we will also be hiring a senior environmental scientist to supervise the environmental scientists in the lab. So all of those are coming soon. And that's all I have for personnel. Does anybody have any questions?
So just for a little background on the change from the chemist classification to environmental scientist. So the chemist classification is, for the state, is one that is underutilized. The candidate pool is very, very small. It's only utilized, I think, by public health and maybe DTSC now. So the environmental scientist classification also, well, you can be a chemist or have a degree in chemistry and or any other science-based degree with lab, experience and be eligible to be in that classification. So there are, it's a much larger pool to hire from. So that was sort of the reason to move in that direction, as opposed to staying with that chemist classification. So looking forward to that recruitment. They should be posted, I would say, within the next week, for sure in the next 2 weeks. And then the supervisor would be Carrie's position. So we'll be hiring all of those essentially at once. We've been down, two chemists in the lab out of 3 for the last couple months. So yeah, it'll be good to get back up to full staff level in the lab. Any questions? Oh, yeah.
Just on that position versus being a researcher, does that expand it, or are they able to go to that after they top out?
As far as the environmental scientist?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm clear on the question.
In terms of the extent of the top level, are they able to jump up to being a researcher then?
So that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I know there are some classifications within the state that are research-based classifications that if you work in a lab or have sort of that background, because we do research as well, that folks could potentially qualify for those positions. I don't know the classifications specifically off the top of my head, but I mean, I can, yeah.
Just curious.
And welcome, Antoinette.
Yeah, thank you. Someone just.
Okay, if there's nothing else on the personnel side, then we'll go to our statistical overview and start with licensing with Karen Skelton. Thank you. This will be her last hurrah.
Good morning, everyone. On page 10 of your materials packets is the licensing statistics, and there's a few things that I want to kind of point out. You will see that there's been a decline in service contracts. Partly it's because of the phone carriers. They kind of go in and out of the business, but we've also taken some major hits with major retailers going down. Some of them, Toys R Us, Babies R Us, Sears and Kmart, Brookstone closed all of their mall stores. So that has had an impact. There's also been some major corporations or major retailers who've downsized, presumably because some of their stores are not as profitable, so they take their resources and pull them into the stores that are more profitable. So we've seen it kind of decline. I did some research just to kind of see if I was seeing names that were coming up regularly that had been canceled. Also, too, I just wanted to kind of let you guys know what we do on a monthly basis as far as issuing licenses. For electronic and appliance repair, it's about 103 on average per month that we issue. For home furnishings and thermal insulation, it's about 137. And household movers, it's about 19 right now on permits that we're issuing. There's been an uptick in the last couple of months because of restoration companies and the word getting out. On that, we're excited to see that. We anticipate seeing a lot more. We're getting a lot of questions and calls, folks coming into the office that need help with the applications. Also, too, in the materials on page 10, there was a request to see if we could do, like, folks that had migrated from importer to manufacturer, vice versa on that. I was not able to do that, but I thought it would be important to do a geographical breakdown so you knew how many of our importers were in California versus other states, how many manufacturers were outside of California, in California, and also overseas. They're classified as an importer overseas because of the way the law is structured. Also, I gave a breakdown of wholesalers. So I thought hopefully that would be informative for you guys in the industry just to kind of see where folks were at on that. And going back onto the household movers, we have consolidated all of our exams. We had 4 different exams. It is now 1 exam, and we just do 1 permit instead of having sub-hauler, local, statewide, and piano movers, which was very rarely used. We found it was more simple for the industry because if they wanted to change their business model and migrate from doing one type of carrying than another, then they didn't have to reapply for the exam. They didn't have to go through the whole background check again. Just having one was much more simple. We also made some changes to the exam since it is one consolidated exam, and our pass rate has gone up significantly from about 63% to about 80 some odd percent this year. So we find that more people are able to pass that, which means there's more people coming into the industry that are in compliance, and we're thrilled about that. Also, just to let you know, we do the quarterly reports, and we're doing the fee study to see if that's still the best way to collect revenue on that. And so far this year, we have collected $1.76 million in quarterly reports. So we are on track for getting the amount of revenue that we anticipated on that.
And that is only Q1 and Q2, correct? Oh, 3 is closed as well?
Closed as well.
Okay.
It's not quite closed, but what we have up to date as of a couple days ago.
Okay.
We were up to that. So yeah, some more will be coming in, but we're anticipating about 2 million. So we are like right on course for that. Are there any questions about the licensing statistics?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for all the work that you've done throughout the years, as particularly making trips with Nicholas down to Southern California and visiting with our CFMA members and learning more about how furniture is made. I think that makes a huge difference for the industry, and we thank you for that. I do have one question, and thank you for the data. It's very informative about how you broke it down geographically. With respect to those numbers, are these for the total 2019? Or
No, this is actually a snapshot.
Okay.
On that. So the upper portion is the snapshot of through September 30th. The geographic breakdown was a snapshot of what our total populations were as of October 30th.
do you have, do you wish to venture a guess as to how that snapshot compares to how it was a year ago?
I wish that I could be able to extrapolate that data. Unfortunately, I have to use an ad hoc program, and I can't do it by date, unfortunately. But now that it's set here, we can start doing it regularly, so we'll have a baseline for down in the future.
Can you make sure to transition that trade secrets of yours to the next person?
I will hand off all my ad hoc reports when I leave.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, if nothing else.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, so moving on to consumer complaint statistics as well as enforcement statistics.
Good morning. My name is Winston. I'm with the compliance unit as an analyst, and I'll be reporting on the consumer complaints for electronic appliance repair and home furnishings and thermal insulation. So far in the current fiscal year for electronic appliance repair consumer complaints, we have received 185 complaints opened, and as well as we closed 77. For household furnishings and thermal insulation consumer complaints, we have opened 79 complaints so far and closed 38. As for household mover consumer complaints, we have opened up 54 and closed 48. Is there any questions regarding that?
And that's the fiscal year, so this is just the data from July 1st.
From July till now, yes,
Okay.
till October. end of October. Okay, if there's no questions on that, moving on to enforcement statistics for electronic appliance repair and home furnishings thermal installation. Beginning with telephone disconnects, for electronic and appliance repair, there were 4 telephone disconnects ordered, and as for home furnishings and thermal installation, 0 telephone disconnects. For investigation cases, for the Bear side, for the electronic appliance repair side, 133 were open, and for home furnishings and thermal installation, 41 were open, for a total of 174. And for closed, respectively, for electronic appliance repair, 126 was closed, and for home furnishing and thermal installation, 37 were closed, for a total of 163. Moving on to citations issued. For electronic appliance repair, 137 citations were issued. For home furnishings and thermal installation, 37, for a total of 174. Other than that, is there questions?
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have one question. I really like how you broke down on the household movers what the complaints were. Is there a way to do that on the home furnishing side?
Yes. We can do that for the next meeting.
As far as what the complaint was?
The
Okay.
categories.
What would you say, or could you speak to that as like maybe what the majority or the on the home furnishing side, what the complaints are, maybe the I don't know, the highest?
The highest, from the best of my knowledge, I think a lot of the home furnishing complaints were more so on some of the contract issues, like say the contract issues were sometimes some companies are not responding quick enough to what the consumer thinks of what, whether on returns or refunds or things like that.
Is there a way of breaking it down whether the complaints were against the particular company, not by name, but with manufacturer, wholesaler, retailer?
Maybe, but I have to see how our database can see if we can pull that type of information off.
And that could be tricky too, because you may have manufacturers with retail operations as well.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, the majority would probably be on the face, right, would be from a retailer.
Okay.
They're the consumer facing, but it could be a manufacturer issue,
Issue as well.
right?
Okay, thank
That
you.
may be hard to
I think I
get
answered.
to that, but we.
No, I answered my own question. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question. So with SB 391 coming, your ability to write citations in the upcoming year, under the household movers investigation statistics, can we add a whole nother box that lists citations and break that down into 2 categories, permitted versus unlicensed operators, so we can have statistical information on citations, both of those that are legally in the industry and those that are not? Thank you.
Sure, we can do that.
And I'll chime in here because Steve's moving ahead to my portion of the speech, which is the actual household movers investigations. And I'll give a report on that really quick and take your advice for future. The permitted versus unlicensed citations will be reported at every advisory council. Brief update on what's been going on with the household movers investigations. This is page 17 for those of you reading along. Of the reported or investigations that our investigators have been working, we've had since July 1st of this year, so just in the last 4 months, a total of 95 cases under investigation. The breakdown there is 13 of those were potential hold hostage situations. 80 of the investigations were surrounding unlicensed activity, and 2 were other, not one of those 2, which I'm not really sure what the other is for those 2, but something that wasn't captured. Regarding specifically the hold hostage situations, the 13 that have been investigated, 9 of them have been resolved, 4 are pending. 1 of them is with the city district attorney, and 1 was forwarded to other agencies for processing. And also, in addition to that, in the last 4 months, 24 cease and desist letters have been submitted to unlicensed household movers, informing them that the need for them to be permitted with our Bureau. Failure to comply will lead to administrative citations for those. Any questions on those investigations other than the ones you asked?
Not a question, but a statement. Again, congratulations. This is a huge deal. This is something that has not been addressed in our state before, and to have you be able to resolve, potentially 13 hold hostage scenarios are people losing all of their worldly possessions and you guys getting them back. That is huge, and that is something that we should be speaking more of. So congratulations to you and to the staff on a really terrific job there. Can't be overstated.
Thank you. And I also wanted to thank Winston for his update, since I just kind of jumped in with mine, and wanted to thank Winston for coming up.
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, since it's a deterrent to make it known that you're enforcing, is there a way to, in your newsletter or publications, to spread the word?
Yes, there is, and we've been, I would say we've been really focused on, working with Matt. Actually, he's in the back here. He's done a lot of publications, press releases with me, and a lot of, flyers and social media contact with folks regarding, what an unlicensed mover sort of looks like, and for consumers, what to look for, and what are the red flags, that sort of thing. So we've definitely put a lot of, I would say a lot of effort into that. Additionally, we'll be recruiting for an outreach position at the Bureau, and that person will really kind of get the whole outreach program for all of our programs. I guess to take it up a notch. So a lot more of outreach events, a lot more social media, and hopefully that will help get get the word out to consumers on what they should and shouldn't do or should look for, So it's exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Okay, so I think we are to item E under number 3, laboratory testing. Sue Shu from the lab, one of the flammability engineers, will give us those statistics.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sue Shu. I'm from the laboratory, and I'm going to report some lab stats. And between July 1st, 2019 and October 30th, 2019, our lab received 42 samples for TB117 2013 tests. Among the samples we tested during the period, 93% of the samples passed the TB117 2013, and 7% failed. The lab received 11 mattress samples during the period. 78% of the completed mattress samples passed 16 CFR 1633, which is the open flame test, and 22% of the completed samples failed. We did not receive any insulation samples during the period. We also tested 20 bedding samples during this period, all passed. The lab also reviewed the labels attached to samples. 14% of the checked labels complying to all the requirements. 56% of them have minor deficiencies. 26% of them have the moderate deficiency, and 4% have major failure. Minor deficiencies, that means a little bit found is a deviation from the standard we specified in our laws. And the moderate deficiencies is if they're off with their components, the percentage, and so that will be moderate deficiencies. And 61% of completed TB 117 2013 furniture samples were made overseas. 32% of those samples were from California, and 7% from other states in the United States. The total of 9 mattress samples were completed. Were all made in the United States. The lab also checked AFR statements on TB 117 2013 covered products. 91% checked no AFR chemical boxes, and 9% checked a yes in their AFR chemical box. During this period, we sent 8 samples to DTSC to conduct AFR tests and also requested documents from the manufacturers. Most of the samples are still in progress. 3 samples are cleared by DTSC, and other samples are still being tested by DTSC. So that's all lab stats. Any questions?
Just for clarification, on the type of test item, that's the full test, either smoldering or the burn test on the upper ones?
You mean the completed samples?
Yeah, like TB 117-2013 is an actual smoldering test?
Yes, TB
Okay. And then the 1633s are also the flame tests?
Yes, that's the open flame. We burned the whole article.
Thank you.
This is Judy. I was curious, it's interesting, 61%, or not maybe interesting, maybe not surprising, 61% were made overseas. Do you have any information about like where they fell in terms of whether their labeling was appropriate or whether they were part of the 8 tests or any of that stuff, or whether they were the ones that said, yes, they have flame retardant?
You mean the overseas one?
Yes,
Yeah, because this is, we only checked the places, and so this, I don't have breakdown of this, but I do have the breakdown if they have the AFRs for the last 2 years, and we have, 10, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, last 2 years is 7 samples failed AFR chemicals, and those 6 from overseas. So most of the materials is like shredded foam.
Right.
Yeah, so it seems they have the AFR, in terms of AFR chemicals, they do have failed more from overseas manufacturer.
And the ones that are checking that they do contain flame retardants, are those also overseas, do you know?
We checked the DTSC, those samples, we checked on those. What I said is those, they did contain AFRs. Most of those are not.
Not checked.
Yeah, not contained AFRs. But with those AFR, DTSC checked with those failed samples, they claim they don't have AFR in the product, but in fact, DTSC found some of those. Most of those manufacturers are from overseas, yes.
But I'm sorry, for those claiming they had FRs present, were those overseas products, do you know, or U.S.-based products?
I think some U.S. they claim when they not sure. Some of those actually told us, they said it's, they just checked that, yes.
I see. Okay. So it's not the overseas folks, typically it's the U.S. folks.
Yes.
Making sure they cover themselves. Okay, understood.
Okay.
I have a question about the DTSC analysis. So is the number that passed, you say, is 3, and they're doing 8? Or, yeah, I'm a little confused by,
Yes,
How-
they're doing 8, and so the first is doing the screening test.
right?
And so this 3, they cleared. They don't have any doubt. They don't have anything over 1,000 ppm. And so other 5, they're not sure, so they're going to go through.
Okay, thank you. And is 8, how many are they going to be doing this year?
They already done a whole bunch in the past, and this is just during this 3 months.
Okay, thanks.
So we don't know the exact number. We have a contract with DTSC, which we've allocated more funds to so that we can do more testing, especially with 2998 coming. So we should see additional, higher numbers of samples tested from prior years.
Yeah, I would hope so, because it seems like they're not moving too quickly.
This is only this 3 months.
Right.
Only one chemist, right?
There's kind of
Well, it's DTSC.
CTSC, yes.
Monitor 2998, thank you.
Absolutely.
On the bedding, I'm just trying to sort that data. 9 received, but 20 pass 100%. Could you explain, what do you mean?
So 9 samples were received from the field, or our investigators in the field, picked up those samples, but the results could have been from prior months.
The months,
right?
okay.
So from before July, because it takes a little time to, complete the testing and get the results.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, what is being tested on bedding? Flammability test or labeling test?
Major is, there is no flammability, and
That's what I thought, yeah.
yes.
So it's a label test?
Yeah, the label test, the dimensional test is to see if sometimes they claim the weight, right, and the finish the size, and that's all we tested. See if their labels are telling the truth.
Got it, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Sue.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's move to item 4, our legislative update. Yafana Lamar, one of the policy managers, will give that update for us.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I wanted to start with the status of the legislature. They're currently on adjournment. They will reconvene on January 6th. So any bills that died this year could be revived in January. If bills that were held up by the legislature are revived, we'll report them at the next advisory council meeting, but I will not take up your time today by discussing them again. You might notice the bill formatting is different. I wanted to combine the chaptered legislative digest with all of the amendments so you can see the total impact of each bill. So if you notice that, that's the reasoning why, and we'll go back to the regular format of legislation at the next meeting. So the first bill on the agenda is AB 5. I did not report on this bill previously because labor law is enforced by the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, and we're not the subject matter experts, but based on interest from the household moving industry specifically, I wanted to give industry a chance to voice concerns. This bill codifies the 3-part legal test formulated in Dynamics versus Superior Court to determine whether a worker who performs services for a hirer is an employee or independent contractor. There are exemptions from this ABC test, and those are in subdivisions B through H of the bill. I want to make sure that it's known that contractor in the labor code has a very different definition than contractor as it applies to household movers. So how this applies to industry, those I can try to answer questions, but again, I'm not the subject matter expert. I would direct those questions to the Labor Commissioner. There are local Labor Commissioner offices throughout California, and you can get those on the Department of Industrial Relations website. And also, the Practice Act, Section 19266, Subdivision A requires any subhauler to be permitted. This has been long established in the Practice Act, so AB 5 is not requiring that a subhauler be permitted. The Household Movers Act requires that a subhauler be permitted.
Could I
Sure.
Could I address that
Of
particular issue? So the term subhauler, I think for at least moving forward, will be relatively a misnomer that in the eyes of the Bureau, unless I completely misunderstand, any permitted carrier has equal standing to any other permitted carrier in the eyes of the regulatory body. So therefore, there is no need for them to register themselves as a subhauler when any permitted carrier can contract with any other permitted carrier for work.
Correct.
Thank you.
So hearing that, I just wanted to open it up to any household movers who may be on the phone, or Steve and Chris. If you had concerns, maybe we could find out the answers or address through regulations. If you have any.
One area that seems to warrant clarification is stepping forward, as I frequently do. SB 358, there is specific language in SB 358 that exempts a permitted carrier from the labor practices of another permitted carrier, which to me seems to fly directly in the face of AB 5. And we're both signed by the governor within a week of each other.
Right. I'll get to SB 358 in a minute, but you are correct on that. And that's not something that we could change through our regs or a change to our Practice Act. Okay. Anything else on AB 5? I was expecting a lot more comments.
May I ask you something, this is Chris Carlson?
Sure.
Yes, first, if a mover is employing what used to be a subcontractor, that is now supposed to be a real, regular licensed mover, and that subcontractor now is not licensed, is now that mover subject to the fines of using an unlicensed mover?
They're not subject now, they always were subject to it. That was what I was talking about when I mentioned Section 19266 Subdivision A. That's a section in the Household Movers Act that requires any subhauler to be permitted by the Bureau. So this was a long-standing requirement.
Okay, I understand that, okay.
Okay.
Now, you spoke before about the exemptions to AB5.
Mm-hmm.
And are you thinking specifically about the B2B exemption?
I highlighted it because it may be something you want to ask the Labor Commissioner about, if that exemption applies to household movers. I was just trying to point you in a direction where you could ask questions to the Labor Commissioner.
Okay.
But I can't answer questions about applicability, yeah.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
This is Pascal Benjamini. As an employment attorney, I have a lot of comments about AB 5.
Okay, great.
But this is not
You
the
are the
forum.
subject
This is
matter
not the
expert.
forum for it. I didn't want my silence to be viewed as an acquiescence.
Okay.
Can I ask a housekeeping question?
Sure.
If I get this to work right. A licensed subhauler currently, Do they have to retake the test to become a licensed carrier?
No, if they're permitted, right?
They're grandfathered in. They're grandfathered in. That's all I needed to know.
Okay.
I have a question related to what we're calling subcontracting, which I think of it just as contracting between two permitted carriers. So with the old regime, if you applied and you put in as a sub-hauler, then the prime carrier or the entity that they contracted with was required to have a sub-hauler's bond in place. If two fully permitted carriers decide to share business practices to work together on individual projects, is one or the other required to have that sub-hauler's bond if the underlying carrier is not identifying themselves as a sub-hauler?
The Practice Act allows us to adopt regs to address that, so that will be,
That needs to be addressed because that's going to be an issue for sure.
okay. Not to get off topic, but our next priority for the household mover regs is licensing. So that may be an issue that it will be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else on AB 5, we'll move on to the easier bills. AB 496 by Assemblymember Lowe was signed. This was an omnibus bill that mostly replaces gendered pronouns with gender neutral terms, but it also requires the Bureau to post enforcement information on our website about household movers. This was a previous requirement for our other practice acts. So now this is an amendment that recognizes the passage of SB 19. Steve had a question at the last advisory council meeting about whether we can post unpermitted enforcement information. I checked the language and double checked with our attorney at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and Section 27 does not allow us. The language specifically says we have to post on licensees and registrants. So I just wanted to let you know I followed up on your question. Any questions about that bill?
And this posting is only done post-determination, right?
Right, only once an enforcement action is final. Okay, oh, sure.
I like the human being. Did you see that? That was good.
There's an exemption or an amendment in the bill that changes his or her, I think, to human being. Okay, the next bill is AB 1296 by Assemblymember Gonzalez. This was previously titled the Tax Recovery in the Underground Economy Criminal Enforcement Program. It would have created an enforcement program within the Department of Justice to recover lost revenue to the underground economy and enforce laws governing those who participate in the underground economy. This bill was gutted, amended, and renamed, and the language was moved from the government code to the unemployment insurance code. There were two task forces that already exist to address this issue, so this bill now just adds the duties that were proposed under the previous version of the bill to the duties of it's called the Joint Enforcement Strike Force on the Underground Economy. So, adding the duties and the ability to collaborate with other entities for the Unemployment Insurance Office to collaborate with the Department of Consumer Affairs and Department of Justice. Since it was existing, it lowered the fiscal, but gets the same result. So that bill was signed and it's effective January 1st. Any questions? Okay. SB 358 by the Committee on Transportation. This bill was also signed. This bill makes technical changes to Labor Code 2810.3, which states responsibilities and obligations of a client employer. This is the change that Steve was talking about. The changes that were made by this bill only recognize the passage of SB 19. They weren't substantive. So the way the law applied before still stands. This bill also adds vehicles that are regulated by the department through the Bureau to vehicles for which the Department of Motor Vehicles may regulate safe operation. This is also an existing authority, and the amendment was to recognize SB 19. Any questions on this bill?
Not a question, but just for the education of the group, the vehicle code section that we had modified along with this other section that we asked them to change that language regarding the labor code was because of the fact that permitted carriers are allowed to only have one identifier on their truck, and that identifier is the CAL-T, but that number, it no longer had any backup with the PUC. That's why we wanted to make sure we had the Bureau note listed on that document. So a mover, if he's only hauling household goods on his truck, doesn't need to have a CA number or other identifiers on their truck other than their CAL-T number. So it was significant for us that be modified.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
Well, sorry.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay, if no other questions on that bill. SB 391 by Senator Monning was signed. This starts on page 55. I didn't highlight anything because the entire bill is relevant because it's the Bureau's bill. This bill allows special investigators and supervising special investigators to issue notices to appear for misdemeanor offenses of the Household Mover Act. This bill is effective January 1st, and our investigators are one of only, I think now 3 bureaus or programs within the entire department who are allowed to issue these notices to appear. So these will be helpful, especially during stings. Law enforcement is hesitant to issue tickets for offenses of the Business and Professions Code. So this will allow our investigators to issue those tickets on stings. So we're very happy about that. Any questions, comments?
Just a statement, I'll use a word I know you enjoy, which is we're going to see much more robust enforcement. And this is, I think, what we've seen already with enforcement without any kind of citation ability has been amazing. And then we expect to see some real enhancements with that. So thank you.
Thank you. And our final bill is Senate Bill 3551, the federal bill that would make our flammability standard TB 117-2013 the national standard. This bill is awaiting a floor vote. It will be packaged with other consumer protection bills, and a vote is expected later this month. Assuming that it passes the floor and is signed by the president, this bill will be sent to the Consumer Protection Safety, Commission to implement.
Does that bill follow our standards exact?
Yes, it says the California standard is the standard. So if we change the standard, it'll change nationwide.
Hi, this is Judy.
Hi.
You mentioned that the SOFA bill is packaged with other consumer protection bills, is that right?
Yes, that's what I've been told.
Okay. Do you know if any of them are controversial or?
No, I don't. I just got the update on the bill status this morning.
Okay.
But I can look into that for you.
I'm just curious if it's a good move to have them packaged like that or if that's going to be a problem. But hopefully it's easy. Okay, thanks.
Okay. I'll provide you an update by email and at the next advisory council.
Quick comment, if I may.
Sure.
The bill still refers to Bearhafty and not BHGS, so.
Have to amend that.
Oh, wow, you're right.
Okay.
This is on page 59 of our packet. This
Right.
is section A2.
I should mention that to Avi Carr, who's been working with Bill Perdue on this. I'll mention that to him.
Okay, yeah, and I will contact Avi as well. Any other questions on legislation? Okay, so, Nicholas, did you? Okay.
Okay, I guess we're on to item 5, the regulation update.
Right,
Are you?
I'm the
You're gonna
first
do-
two.
Okay.
I'm A and B, so
Okay.
I'll be up here.
Great, thank you.
So the agenda item 5A, the AB 2138 regulations, which are the amendments to the substantial relationship criteria and rehabilitation criteria to comply with AB 2138, are going through executive review at DCA. So they went through the first review, which is legal review by our attorney, so they have been moved up to executive review. We still don't know timelines, but these by mandate, have to be effective by July 1st of 2020. Agenda item 5B, the household mover regulations. This proposal is also with DCA for executive review. Our substantial relationship criteria and rehabilitation criteria for household movers are in that package, so we're hoping it moves forward as one, that it's not split out. So, but we'll find out once it goes through DCA executive review. So hopefully I'll have a better guess on timelines for that regulation package by the next meeting.
Could you speak to the kind of the process after it's approved by exec?
Sure. After exec approves all 3 regulation packages, they will go to our agency office where they do a legal review and make sure everything is sound. Once that approval happens, that we are told in January is taking around 2 to 3 months. So then it will go to the Office of Administrative Law. They only check for completeness to make sure all documents that are required to be in a rulemaking are included, and then they will issue us approval to publicly post. So this applies to the household mover regulation package. The 2138 packages are not going to be public posted because they're required to meet a mandated timeline. Okay. Any other questions on the regulations? Okay.
Thank you. Diana, our other policy manager, will give us an update on the law label regulations.
That's right on. On the rulemaking package to update the law label regulations is still underway. The rulemaking process, as you've heard from Fauna, it takes quite a while, can take up to 2 years. And I anticipate taking the 2 years because the detail needed, since the labels now are so outdated, the detail needed to make the regulations clear and easy to understand is what I'm trying to capture in the package. In the meantime, I'm going to skip to agenda item number 8. I've been working on updating and putting more detail into the FAQs what are available on our website right now, and with the examples of the law labels, including the sanitization label and the flammability label with the chemical statement on there. That is under review right now, so I'm hoping to have that out within a week or 2. I'll send that, put that on our website and send it to the council members. That is that. Going on to the booklets that we have online, there was a May revision that was put up that had an error on one of the labels. So we corrected that in October. So hopefully you guys are looking at the October revision that is available on our website now. And that was only the error was in one of the labels. It was a type number 8 label, which showed our old name rather than the new name now. And that is it for the regulation update. If there's any questions.
I have one. When you do revisions, like you just mentioned, to the law label, the type 8, is it possible to disseminate that to the email list that the Bureau has?
I believe we did, but once we updated it in
Oh,
October,
it was?
we
Okay.
did send it
Okay.
through
Thank you.
the interested parties list.
I think maybe the question I would have is, we talked about revising some of the regulations on the law labels. And you're saying that's about 2 years away because it's a regulation, so I understand that. Is there a way we could kind of see what the Bureau is proposing on the regulations, and they can work with industry on the regulations, or is it just, here it is?
The drafting, yeah, we can't make it available until the 45-day comment period.
But that's 2 years away.
Not the period when it's noticed, but the whole entire process will take a 2 year.
So the comment period would be sooner than that.
Okay.
But we did have was it in February?
In February.
We had the workshop, which you participated in. That is I guess the method that, state agencies use to get any ideas from the industry to include or not include. And, we use the results of that workshop to write or draft proposed regulations. So unfortunately, we can't share that until it goes through that initial, approval process, just like the household movers regulations. Once they're approved by OAL, then they would be public, and there's a comment period, which you can make, any comments you'd like during that period. So that's sort of where we are.
I noticed on SB 1433, where we're going to be a Bureau name change at the end of this year. So will our law labels have to have that new name on it, and then potentially a year or two down the road, we're going to be making new law labels that will have different regulations?
Who was
Yes.
covering this?
I am.
You are, okay.
On the 1483?
Yeah.
Yes. So the new name went into effect January 1st of 2019. So it did provide a year to kind of use the old stock on the labels. So we are asking or requiring that the new name be, we're enforcing it starting January 1st, 2020. So yes, once the new regulations are in place, they will require new labels, but that's 2 years away. So regarding 1483, an advisory went out and it's available on our website right now regarding the new name, and each program is affected, whether it's our new name needs to be on the statements that show on your receipts, your invoices, the notices that go out to the consumers. It's all addressed in the advisory. And it also speaks on SB 2998 and the other requirements of 1483, such as the amendments to the service contracts and the definition to consumer goods, which Karen will speak further on. So if you, if you guys can go into our website and look at the advisory, get that information. Hopefully everybody's signed up on our interested parties list.
So we did the 2998, the FAQ. Who's speaking to that? Are you? Okay. Do you want to come back? Thank you.
Hi, sorry for the
Thank you,
constant
Dinah.
changing of presenters. The AB 2998 FAQ was originally distributed in July. We discussed it at the July Advisory Council meeting. And at that meeting, I said that we would give industry time to add more questions, and then we would issue a revision in October. That was posted on our website on October 12th. An email went out to the listserv, and so we added 4 more questions, and to enable everyone reading to understand the changes that were made to the FAQs. On the very last page, I provided a summary of the changes. And this is on page 70 of the materials.
Is this considered a final document at this point, or are there still possibilities for changes?
I would like to consider it final.
Yeah, it's final.
I haven't fully read it, so I don't know if I would recommend it. I just wanted to know.
Okay. Yeah, of course, we will answer any questions that come in, but as far as the document, this is the second version, so I don't anticipate doing another revision. Bert?
Can you clarify the name change? When it comes into effect, I thought I heard that it was coming into effect, that the new labels would have to reflect that as of January 1, 2020. But then I thought I heard something about 2 years. So can you clarify that?
Okay, so SB 1483, which was the Bureau's sunset bill, changed our name. Our name change was effective January 1st of 2019, so the name change is already there.
Right.
As a, just to allow industry to use up their existing stock of labels, our chief allowed a 1-year grace period, but, so that's what moves it into 2020. And then the 2-year period that was mentioned is that's how long it's taking to review and get regulations adopted. So there will be another update to labeling requirements in a couple years, but the name change was actually mandated as of January 1st of this year.
And what will drive the label change in the next following year?
Regulatory changes to the requirements of labels. That'll be in the next couple years.
And so we don't know what those are?
No, those are still being developed.
I see. Okay, thank you.
It looks like Bert has a question.
No, I actually have a comment. First of all, I'd like to thank the Bureau for informing industry with your FAQs and your industry advisors. I know it helps a lot of people to see that, whether it's the household movers or the electronic or the Bureau of Home Furnishings. Is there a way that we can contact certain, I know on the application we have an email address, but that's only for new applications. Is there a way we could maybe put a box on the application to check if you'd like to receive these? Because how many people know these are available?
Well, we send out email blasts to our listserv, but, of course, they have to know that we have a listserv. So,
Do we send out an email address to all of our licensees? No.
No, at this time we don't. Not all of our licensees have email addresses on file. However, we do have addresses, and this, I would like to see the FAQ for AB 998 or 2998 to be mailed, kind of snail mailed to all of our licensees. That could be very expensive, but I think it's a valuable document. We do receive a lot of questions from across the country, primarily in the U.S., I would say. Businesses in the U.S. are licensees about 2998. So I think it would be valuable to at least send them to our, the national companies.
also, our investigators are giving these out when they go on
field there.
Only,
field
only to,
visits?
only to California manufacturers.
Right, but.
That's why if you do send out by snail mail, could you put in a form that says, if you'd like to receive these items in the future, please give us your email address or be added to, what's the list called? Your
Listserv.
Yeah.
Interested parties list?
Yeah, interested party, yeah. I don't know all the acronyms.
Yeah, we can add that to the, to the mailer. Yeah. So folks know.
And next time you can maybe email them to them.
Yeah.
Antoinette?
Just for pollution prevention, maybe consider sending it out electronically to anyone that you have electronics, and then asking them to check if they want to receive a hard copy, because sometimes it just gets thrown out.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah, if we do have, I think for a lot of them, a lot of the licensees, we probably do have an email address on file. I don't know the number, Right, and if they're current, right. But yes, that's definitely the preferred method. I think for the Bureau in general, for DCA and the state right now, it's, electronic is the preferred method.
Maybe you could ask for a return, like reply, so you know if they truly got your note, and if you don't, then send them a hard copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, along the same line, maybe just sending a one-page letter to these people saying, our FAQs are available online, and then also something about getting on the listserv, updating their email. That way, it's just a one-pager rather than, because I know these are expensive to print.
It looks like Antoinette has a question.
Yeah, just outside of that, as I read it, I didn't see insulation being included in these FAQs. Insulation, thermal insulation. Is that true, or have I misread the FAQs? And the reason I ask is especially blown-in materials, polyurethane, how does this work with labeling?
So AB 2998 does not impact thermal insulation, so they're not included. Anything else on the FAQs? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to item number 7A, our ignition interlock device outreach efforts.
And this is Rita Wong. I'll be speaking to this again, this advisory council meeting. I believe I gave everybody an update at the last meeting about us kind of ramping up and getting more involved with Department of Motor Vehicles alongside with Bureau of Automotive Repair in determining the best ways to, I guess, address issues with the ignition interlock device population based on the current regulations that we have. So that has continued. We've been completing a lot of cross-departmental meetings and education, sharing a lot of information in order to be able to better, in the future, develop some regulations for both the Bureau as well as automotive repair, both of them. They should be in sync relatively. So that has continued. A stakeholders meeting was hosted by Department of Motor Vehicles that we were invited to attend and provide some education to the ignition interlock device manufacturers. That basically, the basic update that the Bureau provided at that stakeholders meeting was related to the licensing requirements of the Bureau. There had been some feedback from manufacturers that their service centers and installing technicians were falling delinquent with the Bureau and therefore not able to install the devices, but they were putting it on the Bureau, saying that our processing times for licensing was too long, which was false. So I was able to clarify that with the manufacturers, that our licensing typically takes no more than 2 to 3 weeks. And if they're filing their renewal fees online, then it's 24 hours, it's immediate. So we kind of put that to rest. And then also just, again, we just we really have been developing stronger relationships with all three departments, and it's been very exciting to see everyone work together on this now to develop something better in the future. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Just on universality is always the aim for, is it an expensive device? Do you expect it would ever be installed on all devices, all cars for, yeah, in the future?
Right now, I don't know if there are any plans in the future to have them installed on all devices. It varies on the device and the manufacturer, but I believe it's in the thousands, yeah. And there was a question previously relating to having all of the devices be the same. The only issue that we would really face with that is then we would be excluding certain manufacturers. There's currently 12 ignition interlock device manufacturers who are approved in the state of California to install their devices. So we would be getting rid of 11 of them if we do that. So, I mean, that probably would come against some complaints, but it is definitely something that would be nice.
There are actually some states that allow businesses to install their devices on their vehicles, company vehicles. I mean, in California, I couldn't see that being be allowed or ever be a requirement for vehicles, I mean, in the near future, right? Okay, thank you.
But anybody can have one put on their car, so if you guys are interested, you can reach out to one of the
On your
manufacturers.
kid, your folks put them on their kids,
Yeah, your teenagers.
their children's cars, and
Or maybe your parents.
Okay, thank you. Service contract requirements on the Bear side? Karen?
Okay, yep, that's back again with me. SB 1483 had some service contract language that had delayed implementation just because we were dealing with household movers over the last year. We kind of didn't want to have everything come to us at once on there. The biggest deal is the change of the Bureau having the regulatory authority over consumer goods. Instead of the cherry-picked list of items that every time that you wanted to add an item to the service contract law, it required legislation. So what they used for the definition of consumer goods is what's in Song Beverly Consumer Warranty Act, California Civil Code, Section 1791. And the definition is any new product that is used, bought, or leased for personal, family, or household purposes except for clothing and consumables. Consumer goods shall include new and used assistive devices sold at retail. Clothing also includes shoes. We've actually had filings for service contracts on shoes. Those will still not be regulated by our Bureau. Also to anything that is done commercially for a government institution or an educational institution. Anything that is business to business is not under our jurisdiction, only those consumer products. In some cases, we may have to consult with the California Department of Insurance. We did have a recent filing for an HVAC, but it was just the compressor. So it was one component of the unit versus being for the whole system. So in some cases, we may need to contact them just to make sure we're not stepping over their authority and that we're all on the same page on what falls under that. But we have also seen firearm filings recently. Service contracts can be sold on just about anything. We've seen rugs in the past, water heaters, which did not fall under the Bureau's jurisdiction. So it'll be interesting what we see come aboard. And we also expect to have an influx of new licensees, registrants come in with this, but also to some of the folks that were already administering service contracts for these other products that weren't regulated. We'll get the filings in that we'll have to review on that to make sure that they're in compliance. One of the other items that changed via the law is a requirement that a service contract be filed with the Bureau at least 30 days prior to use. while the Bureau is not mandated to review those contracts and like approve them, we like to be able to help folks get into compliance from the very beginning instead of having contracts out there that, okay, now you've got 3,000 contracts out of there that are not in compliance. So if we can help on the upstart with that, I've got 2 analysts, and we're going to be recruiting for another half of an analyst. It'll be split between household movers and service contracts to be able to help us with that workload. Another thing is that the filings need to include documents that are incorporated by reference. Sometimes there's an invoice or a receipt or a declaration page that is incorporated in that. We need to see samples of those just to make sure all of the elements are captured between the language of the contract and that subsequent document on there. Also, please have it noted that it's not a requirement that the Bureau have things registered, but that the contract must contain a clear description and identification of that product, and that is part of Song-Beverly Consumer Warranty Act. So that is critical. We will be looking for that either in the document or in this ancillary documents that are filed for that. But yeah, the Bureau does not require registration of the products, but there's other ways to be able to get that via the receipts or whatever on that. So as long as the product's identified one way or the other, we will use the Song-Beverly barometer. Is this a clear a description of this product that we can be able to identify it? Also, service contract forms will need to be identified with a unique form number and a date of revision, especially given the fact that we're going to have so many more coming in. It's impossible for us to keep track of what was filed when, and then folks think that they filed something and they'll refer to something and it's like, whoa, the language is totally different on this. So we need to have a unique number on those contracts and a revision date so we know what we're dealing with and what's in force at the time. Also, no changes may be made to the contract without a new filing unless it's a variable section, variable information that's already identified in an initial contract. So there may be language where then it has a spot that says insert this link or this information here. As long as that remains variable in the first one, you don't have to change or do a new filing if you're just changing the information that's going in that variable slot. But anything outside of that variable slot is considered a new contract and it needs to be reviewed. And so those are the changes. I know it's a lot on there, but if anybody has any questions.
Karen, are we still talking? I have an unrelated question regarding Industry Advisory 1902.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for your service, and hopefully you have a joyous and long, happy retirement. So wishing you all the best with that. On the last page of that advisory is an item from Max 4 Tariff, item 465. The only thing that is of slight confusion to me is that you guys have created a document and you put insert toll-free number here. So what number do you want us to put on this form?
Okay, I'm going to let somebody else address that.
Thank you very much. I remember something along those lines, but yeah, we would, thank you.
Okay, nothing else?
Thank you, Karen. Okay, Fauna again. We're moving to item number 9, Division of Household Movers update.
Hi, I asked for household movers to be at the end of the agenda in case, well, it would probably make a smooth transition into public comment. So the first item, agenda item 9A, household mover scope and licensing requirements. This is actually Industry Advisory 1903. Apologies for the poorly titled agenda item. I didn't have a name for the industry advisory when the agenda went to print. So this is on page 80 through 84 of the materials. The intended audience for this advisory is unpermitted movers, especially those who may not be aware they're required to obtain a permit, those whose business model is not strictly that of a household mover, those who also need to have federal operating authority and maybe not clear on permitting requirements in California, and for our investigators to guide them in the field on which code sections they can educate the people who they're investigating on. This advisory specifically addresses restoration companies, brokers, interstate household movers, and storage containers, or commonly known as pods. For those who need a little extra motivation, a section on the potential penalties for operating without a permit precedes the business model specific information, and that part starts on page 1. This advisory was posted to our website, and an email blast went to our interested parties list on November 5th. Has anyone had a chance to read it, or do you have any questions?
Read it, agree with it, support it, move forward, let's go.
Very much so.
It's aggressive, yeah.
It's aggressive, huh? Oh, I thought I was being soft. Thank you. Okay, if that's it, I'll move on to agenda item 9B.
Could you just, I mean, without reading the entire advisory, would you mind maybe adding sort of the highlights of especially those that those industries that maybe historically were not
becoming permitted?
Yeah.
Sure. So everything falls back to Business and Professions Code 19235, which is on page 1. This states a household mover shall not engage in the business of transportation of used household goods and personal effects for compensation by motor vehicle over any public highway in this state, except in accordance with the provisions of this chapter. There are no exemptions. There are no business models that, no matter what they say they do, if they engage in that activity, it has to be in accordance with the act. Also, Business and Professions Code 19228, subdivision B, makes violations of any rules, regulations, general orders, and the tariff a violation. That is very important, especially for those who have not been historically permitted, because they may not know that they need to follow the tariff, and failure to do so is a violation. Steve?
I would interject that while under the storage containers, we've used the word pods, which is the equivalent of saying Kleenex, right? So it's a brand that has come to identify an industry. But this, in my understanding, and as you just stated, would include the large freight carriers that are also now allowing people to use segments of their trailers for the transportation of used household goods, either within the state or interstate.
Right, there's a section on freight forwarders on the last page. Freight forwarders who are operating as a freight forwarder do not need to be permitted by the Bureau. However, if they move household goods for compensation in the state, they need to do so in accordance with the act.
Okay. So that is
And that's stated in that section, and motor carriers of property as well. If they are operating strictly as a motor carrier of property, they do not need to be permitted. If they're moving household goods for compensation over a highway in the state, they need to comply with that.
Yeah, I think it'd be fantastic once you have your citation authority and fully staffed for us to have a little workshop and talk about all the possibilities that would encompass.
Revenue enhancement.
Yeah, so the background on this is, there's definitely been an uptick. I mean, everyone has seen, a lot of, I don't want to name particular companies, but that, maybe you would rent a truck and do the move on your own, and now they provide, a container that they can drop on your, front yard, and then you load it yourself, there's been a large increase in that activity, and that activity is a covered activity of the Household Movers Act. So that's the reason really that we've done I believe two press releases. One was right when we took over, maybe a month later when we determined that it's a problem, and then another one earlier this year, maybe in the spring, and now this industry advisory. And we have received a lot of, I guess, feedback or contact from these companies, had a lot of conversations with them about this sort of niche that they've found that the previous regulatory agency didn't determine was a covered activity. However, we do, and it's clear in the Act under 19235 that it is a covered activity. So we will be pursuing enforcement actions against folks that have a business model such as that are not complying with the Act and getting permitted. So just know that.
One other area that these freight and containerized companies do that I think needs to be addressed is that their valuation, their protection for the consumers on the federal side, on the freight side, is 10 cents per pound per article, whereas by regulation, our minimum is 60 cents per pound per article. So right there, the consumer is damaged in the event of something negatively transpiring for the same commodity being transported in a different mode. So I think that in addition, I don't know, I didn't read that to detail to understand if aspects of the tariff also are applicable to these parties, but I would say that I would extend at very least those valuation limitations to them as well.
So all items in the tariff are applicable to all of these industries. That's in the final paragraph of the first section on the first page. 19228C makes a violation of the tariff grounds for the Bureau taking disciplinary action. So that the valuation requirements, along with every other requirement in the tariff, are grounds for disciplinary action. I want to highlight one more thing about unpermitted movers. There are civil penalties that may be problematic for those who operate while unpermitted. Business and Professions Code Section 19237, Subdivision B, prohibits an unpermitted mover from enforcing a security interest to recover any money that's owed to them by a consumer. Furthermore, any person who utilizes the services of an unpermitted mover can sue to recover all money paid to them, even though services were provided.
So a good example of that is one of our, I'm just trying to see if they're not here. But so we had a whole hostage situation in Sacramento. It was on an interstate move from Georgia, family, great family, moved to Elk Grove, subdivision, or
Suburb.
A suburb of Sacramento. And the moving company refused to unload their goods, had them, but refused to unload them unless they paid an additional, whatever it was, an extreme amount, over $5,000 or something. They had already paid $15,000 or whatever it was. So luckily they called us. We were there with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department, and essentially I told them, unless you want your truck and trailer towed and by the CHP, which we have the authority to do, they won't pay you any additional money. and you'll unload all the goods. And they did. So it worked out. I mean, there's a lot of cases where, it's not that easy, right? But that's sort of that's an example, I guess, of really what you were saying as far as if you're engaged in illegal activity, the consumer has no obligation to pay for the service.
And can sue to recover all money already paid. So because this went to our investigators, our supervising special investigator in Southern California met with all the investigators in Southern California to go over this document yesterday and highlighted that part. So when they're working a consumer complaint, they will let the consumer know that this is the remedy. We cannot order restitution or money to be refunded, but they will be informing consumers that they can take legal action. Any more
questions?
Comments? Antoinette?
I know I've brought this up before, and I just want to keep it on the table. There's going to be issues with SB 1383 because organics that are a resource in a home or a community garden, there's need to use contract services to move that material. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how this works out, whether they just stay on local roads away from highways, but, there's a mixture in local roads that are public highways. So,
So the definition of public highway for purposes of the act is on page 1. And it's any road, any public road in the state. So it doesn't have to be a highway, it can be a street, as long as it's a public street.
Specifically the 1383, though, that wouldn't, it is it's a large issue and something that I think a lot of people in the state aren't aware of.
Right.
Essentially, and I'll speak to it just because I used to work for the agency that CalRecycle. So all organic material or food waste will be banned from going in your garbage can or going to a landfill in the state. So that's huge, right? You think about universities, you think about elementary schools, I don't know, the building across the street, DCA headquarters, there will need to be separate containers for just food waste. And that is because of, essentially because of the amount of methane, greenhouse gases that are released from landfills, and the culprit, if you will, is putrescible waste, which is organic waste, food. So it will be banned from landfills.
Just point of clarification, it already started in January 1st of this year, but I want a point of clarification. You used the word waste. From a standpoint of a garden or a home that creates it, it's a resource, not a waste, because it can then be recycled or recovered into a commodity that can be sold for $40 a pound.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. Yeah, so there are a lot of, technologies out there that compost those materials. They capture the gases. They can use them for biofuels actually Sacramento City does that, and they power their trash trucks with that gas that they're capturing from anaerobic digestion and different technologies. So anyway, sorry. It has nothing to do with the Bureau really, but.
Well, the part that does is just the community level, the commodity of the consumer, because their franchise agreements are going to be sort of come in conflict with the allowances to move the material legally.
Yeah.
That's where it gets very legalistic.
Right. So the material that if you choose to compost that material on your property, it's not a covered, it's not a used household good. It's not considered that. So it definitely wouldn't fall under the jurisdiction of the Bureau. I mean, it's an issue, but it's not one that we would oversee, and I don't see it us, getting into that area at all in the future.
Yeah, if that bill applied to household movers, I would have been reporting on it all year.
Yeah. So, thanks for the comments on that, though.
Okay, unless there's anything else, moving on to agenda item 9B, the tariff update for 2020. The consumer price index data that we use to calculate the updated rates in the tariff are scheduled to be released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics on November 14th. Barring any major holdup, I anticipate this year's update being issued in time for use by January 1st of 2020. I will also include that 800 number in that update. Are there any questions about that? Okay. I'll stay up here for public comment.
All right, item number 10, any public comments on items not on the agenda or just anything in general? Could you? That's fine, yeah.
Hi. I'm Jacob Gilroy here with ServPro. Was asked to make a formal statement entered into the record. ServPro Industries LLC still has some additional questions, and we very much look forward to working with the BHGS and the DCA staff on moving forward with the rulemaking process. There are a lot of unique and complex situations in the restoration process. And so we believe the best path forward at this time would be to put a temporary stay on disaster restoration companies and the permitting requirements while we work through those questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Any folks on the phone? Okay. Any future agenda items that anyone that's on the phone or here on the advisory council would like to see on our next council meeting? No? Okay. Well, thank you. Our next meeting will be on March 12th. So, look for materials and outreach on that in, end of February, beginning of March. And of course, we're always open to, if you have an issue within your industry or licensing issue, complaint, anything of that nature, you can always call the Bureau. We're more than happy to work with licensees or unlicensed folks to educate them and help them through the process. So, yeah, thank you, everyone. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.